what's up YouTube? Welcome to today's video, and this is pretty much just going to be a brief, or not really brief, but a full overview of what Ruthless Mode actually is. So Ruthless Mode is one of the things that a lot of people have been kind of anticipating or kind of memeing on, otherwise known as hard mode. So it's a form of the game pretty much designed for one person, Quinn69. This is a mode that's been through and through made to be as tedious and as difficult as possible. So we're going to go over all of the changes that they made into Ruthless Mode, what Ruthless Mode actually is, and whether you should play it or not. So Ruthless Mode was probably teased around, I think, in like 3.15 in Expedition. I don't even remember, but it's been a long time coming. And they pretty much say that they've been spending their hobby time or off hours from developing PoE, working on this as a side passion project. So I do know a lot of people like to hate on them and say, oh, they're spending all this time doing Ruthless Mode. But in reality, they're saying that they have been just spending their spare time. So it's like if you had a hobby and you were working on a job related to your hobby, or a hobby related to your job during your spare time. But obviously, no one can really confirm whether they spent any development time on this. But if I just take it at what they say, this mode was a passion project that they pretty much made in order to get this nostalgic feeling back in Path of Exile. So Ruthless Mode will be an additional character creation tag, and that means that our worst fears are confirmed. You can play SSF Hardcore Ruthless, you can play Hardcore Ruthless Trade, you can play Softcore Ruthless Trade, you can play SSF Softcore Ruthless, and that includes Softcore Trade, SSF Softcore, Hardcore Trade, and SSF Hardcore. So it's pretty much a bunch of tags. But you can play this mode on Softcore. It's pretty much an additional challenge that you can possibly have. So first question we want to answer is, who is Ruthless for? And as I said before, it's for Quinn69. It's honestly, in my opinion, a mode for people who have a lot of time on their hands and want to play PoE and kind of want to just grind maps infinitely and feel a sense of accomplishment because they spent so much time grinding something. And Ruthless is definitely not for everyone, as I said, and most people should continue playing regular Path of Exile. So this is a pretty good thing, because right now there's kind of a split between what people feel like GGG want the game to become and what people want the game to be like. And right now, a lot of people feel like GGG removed loot. So for Ruthless could be a way that GGG can have this vision of their game when there's no items dropping, there's no crafting currency dropping, reaching maps is actually super hard. And that vision can stay in the corner and everyone else can play regular Path of Exile, the version of Path of Exile that actually got the game popular and mainstream. So this is not going to be a replacement for regular Path of Exile. And they wanted to stress that Ruthless does not consume any significant development resources. So what exactly is Ruthless? So this mode is about friction, tension, and anticipation, allowing for highly rewarding gameplay. So there is something that a lot of people say is that nothing ever drops in PoE that has value. So all of the rares you find on the ground, none of that stuff has value. You don't feel excited to see a bunch of rares. And the reason why we're not excited for any of this is pretty much because too much of it drops. And that's pretty much saying that when we have too much money in life, we're not really happy when we have more money, right? Because we have so much money already. So this is pretty much a mode where we're going to be poor and we're going to look forward to every single meal we're going to be eating. So it kind of redefines the end game back to how PoE used to be in open beta. If you never played PoE back then or in closed and open beta, back in my day when I was super old, reaching high level maps or tier 15 or tier 16 equivalent maps, which was monster level 77 back in the day, was the end game. Everyone would run Shipyard and Shrine, and then they had the expansion where the end game maps were pretty much, I think, Courtyard and Palace. And that was the whole end game back in the day. There was no end game bosses really. It was pretty much just spamming the high level zones, and it was considered a pretty big miracle to be able to run the high level maps like Shipyard and Shrine, and people were even exalting their maps back in the day when exalts were super expensive, back when there was already extreme scarcity. So Ruthless has extreme item scarcity and crafting currency scarcity. One of the things they mentioned is that we could go through the entire campaign and only find one orb of alchemy. Now just imagine how much fun that is, right? You go through the campaign, you don't find anything, you finally get this one orb of alchemy, and you can actually alch one of your items and have it be OP. It can have 1 life regen and 5 dex and 10 life. And that is why we play PoE for in Ruthless. We play it so that we can have enjoyment and we can feel something again. Because in PoE, we've become pretty much dopamine out drug addicts where we just can't feel any rush anymore because we just get too much loot. And they mentioned something about how this mode brings back nostalgia, back to how PoE used to play in closed beta. And this is something that people feel like that GGG is going wrong about, where they just keep going back to the nostalgic feeling of how Path of Exile used to be. And that feeling is not really there because the game has changed, the players have changed, the knowledge for PoE has changed, and that's something that GGG just doesn't seem to get, is that the nostalgia exists, but it shouldn't be something that you base the rest of your game's vision on, and it shouldn't be something that holds you back. And Ruthless Mode could be good for this because they can keep that vision in this corner of Ruthless, which I do think will not be played by that many people. So you might be wondering, can I just get around the item scarcity, use crafting mats? Like, can I just Chaos Orb, Veiled Chaos Orb, get some guaranteed Veiled Chaos mobs? Well, for Ruthless Mode, they want most of the items to come from actually killing monsters. It's hard to find magic, rare, unique items, and it's even harder to craft them. So crafting is a luxury. There's pretty much no real crafting in Ruthless Mode. As you can see, if you're only finding 1 orb of alchemy throughout the whole campaign. So if you ever want to craft an item, it's pretty much going to be like 1 chaos and you're done, or 2 chaos, or 3 maybe even, or 4. And maybe for the uber rich people, you can spam 10 chaos orbs. And that's pretty much because the drop rate for crafting currency has been massively decreased. There's less charge from vendoring items. There's no crafting bench or master crafting, so you can't craft on the resist you need to fix. So if you ever play Endless Delve before, you know how annoying it is not to have a crafting bench. And it will make Geary a very, very difficult proposition, especially when you're trying to fix your resist. There's no Veiled Chaos Orbs, Orb of Bindings, Orb of Dominances, Influence Exalted Orbs, and Awakener's Orbs. And the funny thing is they really want to make influence items, even a well-rolled influence item, impossible to get. So the only way we can get a good influence item is for it to drop. And in order for the influence item to even drop, it's going to be a miracle because it has to drop rare in order to get the stats. And if you actually reforge an influence item, the item loses its influence. So you can pretty much see this pair of gloves here, 8-link gloves. You will never find this item. It will be a miracle in order to find this. You're probably more likely to find an item that drops like this than you are to win the lottery. Or winning the lottery is more common than that. Now, you might be wondering, can I just vendor a bunch of items to get Chaos Orbs to craft with? Well, most vendor recipes are not available. And this is something that I mentioned in that this mode would only work if GGG put in a lot of time and effort into it. And they did put in a decent amount of effort, as we'll see later on with the Atlas passive tree. So they actually disabled a lot of the vendor recipes. And there are a few new Ruthless specific vendor recipes, not really sure what they're going to be. So in this mode, if you ever played PoE back in the day, you will remember that there's reduced mana gem, there's greater multiple projectiles, chain gems, and they used to be worth a lot. So they kind of want to go back to this. The skill gems and support gems are pretty much now considered as valuable drops or pretty much types of currency as they can't be purchased from vendors. You will still be able to get a token from Fixture of Fate and Death and Rebirth. Every time you do it through the campaign, you'll get a token. You can trade in for any skill gem level 31 or lower. So what this means is that support gems are probably going to be the ones that are super expensive as you can't get this token. This thing is actually kind of tedious because I feel like this is a bad idea because it's pretty much just incentivizes people to make alts and get more tokens and get all the skill gems they want. So this is another thing that you can see. It's not really difficult as much as it is tedious. So support gems can only be found as random drops, so getting greater multiple projectiles, chain, cast when damage taken, and stuff like that, I would assume are going to be very, very, very valuable, and it's going to cost a lot. Another thing they added into the game is that gems will now gain less experience in order to make the gap smaller between spellcasters and melee. They mentioned that spellcasters obviously scale a lot better with gem levels, and melee is kind of sucks, but melee doesn't scale as much with gem levels. So the way they want to balance melee and spellcasters is to nerf spellcasters. And this is kind of a sad thing to see, because this means that GGG's approach to balancing, at least in this mode, is still nerf something instead of buffing other things. So what we're going to be expecting is probably seeing Spectral Helix nerf, Nightblade nerf, Lightning Strike nerf, instead of seeing other stuff buffed in order to compensate for it. And that's actually a very, very worrying trend that GGG feels like that they should just nerf the gem XP in order to make the gap smaller between spellcasters and melee. Now, next up, we have the most brain dead change. I actually do not know what GGG is actually thinking here. They are actually removing all movement skills in Ruthless Mode. Almost every single movement skill is gone. I don't think there's Leap Slam, there's no Shield Charge, there's no Whirling Blade, so you can't even play Venom Jar. They even specifically said that. There's no Flame Dash. And the reason behind that is in this mode, movement skills trivialize game systems that matter a lot more, such as terrain layout, monster body blocking, and actual level traversal. So pretty much they don't want you to move around the map with any sort of speed. They want you to be stuck in the middle of mobs. You might as well not have phasing. You pretty much can't do any of the boss fights that rely on having a movement skill. And it just seems like a terrible, terrible experience. And this change right here, I think, is the one that's going to turn off a lot of people who would have normally played this mode, and even the most hardcore players. So they also have a bunch of additional changes that I'll go over real fast. So item drops are not allocated to party members, so prepare for ninja looting. Apparently, Ruthless Mode is super fun. When people steal your items, you get that sense of adventure and fun. And there's also a compounding character experience penalty from level 68 onwards. If you ever actually looked at, let's go look at the ladder for Onslaught, Path of Exile, Onslaught League, Path of Exile, you will see that in this league, no one actually reached level 100, and the highest level was 96 in a 3-month league. Now, this is pretty interesting to note, because they kind of want you to never even be able to get to like level 95. Getting to level 90 is probably going to be a miracle. And I do think that they probably want to go back to the, that getting a level 100 character really has some insane value to it. Now, this next change is kind of crazy again. Flasks are not restored upon entering town or your hideout, but you can talk to vendors to refill them. Like, what the fuck is that change? Like, what's even the point of this change? It doesn't make the game more difficult. It makes it annoying because you have to go back to the town and talk to a vendor to refill the flask. That just kind of reminds me of Diablo 2 Resurrected, where I had to go to town. I have to like fill up my belt slot in order to use the flask. It's just not good gameplay. It's just not fun. It's not really that hard at all. It's just annoying and tedious. Onslaught has no effect at all in this mode. So this gem Onslaught, or the 20% move speed, attack speed, and cast speed is just gone. It doesn't matter. It just has no effect whatsoever. And this goes in line with their thing where they're trying to get rid of movement skills. There's no death rushing the campaign bosses, as the bosses will recover life on each death. And I do think that this is a good change, and that's not really too big of a deal. Utility flasks have lower durations. As you'll see, a lot of these changes don't have really specific numerical values. They're pretty much just telling us what they're doing. So scarabs only enable mechanics in a map but do not scale in power with tiers. So we'll actually need higher tier scarabs for higher tier maps, but they won't actually buff the league mechanic that spawns. And this is the thing right here that I predicted, is that Ruthless will need a specific Atlas tree, because a lot of the Ruthless league, a lot of the league mechanics are guaranteed on the Atlas passive tree. Like, you can get guaranteed essences, you can get guaranteed shrines, and it's just not going to fit the design archetype of Ruthless Mode, which is limited league mechanics. So they want content from past leagues to be encountered a lot less often, and there's not going to be any free Atlas missions. And also, vault side areas and kindling orbs and instilling orbs do not exist. I'm assuming they don't want flask usage to be super spammy. They want you to think about when you want to use the flask. And vault side areas would just guarantee vault support gems, which I assume GGG wants to make it like an extremely rare thing. So this is pretty much their design philosophy here. Ruthless is challenging and punitive. It contains a number of changes that make Path of Exile harder. And this is a statement I don't agree with. It does not make Path of Exile harder in the traditional difficulty sense. It makes it more time consuming and allows skilled players to differentiate themselves from everyone else, and allow players with infinite time to differentiate themselves from everyone else should be the main thing they put. So overall, what do I think about Ruthless Mode, and will I actually play it? I'm definitely not playing Ruthless Mode at the start. I might give it a try after the league dies down a little bit, but for all intents and purposes, playing Ruthless Mode is like playing a league with no league mechanic, and it really feels like I'm going backwards in time and playing PoE when it just feels like I'm playing an inferior version of PoE when there's a better version out there, when there's actual crafting, when you can actually drop items, when you can actually shape the course of your journey rather than just farming the same map tile set over and over and over again, praying for that 1% drop. Now, I do know where they get that feeling from. If you ever watch any D2R ladder streams, people are pretty much just spamming Mephisto or whatever the ball runs are. I never really played that game, but you can definitely see where PoE gets a lot of their motivation from. And the problem with this is they're trying to move Path of Exile into a vision of a game that's 20 plus years old that belongs in the grave, in terms of if we always just go backwards in time and trying to move backwards, we're never going to innovate the genre forward. And I feel like that's a pretty bad part. But it's nice to see that they have this mode that they're going to test all of the stuff out in. And they'll probably keep all of their vision that they have for the game from before locked in this game mode that a few people will enjoy. And this mode is so challenging or whatever, they're tedious, that it says almost all movement skills are not available in Ruthless. And even Ziz, who is probably a huge proponent of this, was saying, I was getting kind of keen, but then, and he saw the movement skill changes. And then Matto says, what, too hard for you? And he says, no, I'd rather just have a long cooldown. It doesn't sound fun. So yeah, there is something between difficult and just not fun. It's not fun to not have a movement skill. And I do think that GGG will probably listen to the feedback around this and probably change it. It will give us a pretty good perspective about where GGG is in regards to if they'll actually change up the movement skill thing and probably add in a cooldown. So the main thing is Ruthless is definitely confusing tediousness for difficulty. A lot of the changes that you see right here are not really difficult. It's not really that much more difficult to farm longer or farm docks forever to get the support gem you need. It is not really that much more difficult to just grind maps longer to get higher level. It's not more difficult to, it is more difficult to have lower move speed and no movement skills, but it just feels bad. A lot of this stuff is, the game is not even more difficult than the gauntlet mode. It just takes a lot more time to finish off the game. It's an annoying experience, and that doesn't even bring into question about build diversity. Build diversity is going to be completely horrible in this mode. We're literally going to be playing Spectral Helix or whatever the most powerful skill is, purely because we can still get the skill gem we want because we get that token. And obviously when you have item scarcity and you have no real items, we have to play the best skill gem possible in order to get as far as possible. So it's literally going to be everyone playing the exact same skill or build. Now, I hope GGG will never ever try to solve meaningful item drops by making the game drop no items. I know 3.19 is kind of like that. And that's kind of just such a horrible way of doing it. Like, they talk about making items drop on the ground feel meaningful. And their way of solving it in this manner is to make it so that no items drop at all, so that even the tiniest item drop will be happy. And that's just a cooked way of balancing, in my opinion. But I do think the game has changed a lot since Path of Exile was in closed beta. There's so many things in the game now that will make it so that nostalgic experience will never exist. For instance, Path of Building has changed PoE forever. It's made people so much better at build making. And a lot of the stuff in closed beta and open beta about why PoE was so much slower was because of the reflect aura on rares. The reason why clear speed was so bad was purely because hardcore players was super afraid to even attack into a pack because they were able to insta-die to a Reflect aura. So if you want to make it so for nostalgic purposes, you might as well bring back Reflect aura on rares. You might as well bring back the Detonate Dead instant mechanic. And there's so many things, and you might as well bring back desync, because that's pretty much my number one experience with PoE and closed and open beta was the desync. And none of this mode will bring back that nostalgic feeling, because I'm just not the same person as back then, and I think a lot of people can say the same. We don't have as much time to play the game, and we're not really into grinding endlessly for no reward at all. But this is definitely a mode that confuses tediousness for difficulty, but I do think it will be maybe a fun playthrough, maybe like once or twice, but I cannot see this mode ever becoming that popular. And if they go through with these no movement skill changes, I think even the most hardcore of streamers will probably be super turned off, because no movement skill equals no fun, and no fun does not necessarily equal super difficult. But thanks for watching, everyone. Let me know down in the comments below if you intend to play this Ruthless mode and what changes you think GGG should make to it, or if you think it's perfect as is. But thanks for watching. I hope you find more mirrors, exalted orbs, and divines than me, and see you next time. Bye.